Well, hello, that's me again. Today is actually September 29th, 2025. It is a late Monday here in Seattle. Well, not really late, it's 9 o'clock. The reason I'm coming to you at this moment is because I'm probably going to be gone tomorrow and maybe tomorrow, after tomorrow for a while, and I will not be able to make my input, so to speak, to the very anticipated, and exciting for some people, meeting at Quantico by Mr. Hexet, the Minister of War nowadays in United States, and obviously President of the United States, Donald Trump, with military top brass, American military top brass. And so, but what you see in the beginning, and I will explain to you why it is important, is the fact that, it's the Belgorod Symphonic Orchestra, and the reason they play with the flashlights, because this was shot, pardon me, a couple of days ago, when the HIMARS and all kinds of other types of the drones have been launched at the civilian facilities in Belgorod, in the city of Belgorod, and they blew up one of the substations. As I already stated, there is always the chance that you'll get a leaker and it will hit something, and they got lucky and they hit the substation, which basically it resulted in the loss of power for some significant amount of time for some segments of the city. And I can report to you that everything has been fixed, that the city is operating normally. But this is the moment which you cannot convey to any American general or American serviceman, because they don't have any reference point of that, what the spirit of people is. And if you go, and I wrote about this in my blog, and you can go there and take a look at it, how I describe it, it is all harking back to the siege of Leningrad and heroism of people, which is unrivaled in history. And this is what it is. And the orchestra, played on. And while the air defense battle was raging above their heads, and it was successful, most of the drones and HIMARS, missiles, and all kinds of other things have been shut down, and the city is back to normal, if you can call it normal, when you are near border of near to terrorist, essentially, entity, which modern Ukraine is. And then, before I go there, I want to also show you something. It's really important. Not really. So if you go and see Mr. Trump's yesterday's, well, actually it's still today, I believe, post in his True Social, whatever, and he's talking about that some of the highest quality 24 karat gold used in the Oval Office and cabinet room of the White House, foreign leaders and everyone else freak out. Okay, I don't know why they freak out, but okay, when they see the quality and the beauty, best Oval Office ever in terms of success, and look, President Donald J. Trump. Let me show you something. This is the video of that thing, and something tells me that, before I go and tell you what it tells me, why it tells me, is I repeat it ad nauseam. You cannot buy culture, you cannot buy class, you cannot buy history. You just can't. What you are, and you have to live. And the more cultured you are, and I'm not talking about people being well read. There are many jerks who, among very well read people, and even especially morons with the PhDs, some of whom did read things, but it doesn't make them smarter. And in this case, it doesn't make them classier. Case in point, Michael McFaul, the guy's an imbecile, essentially, but he was the US ambassador to Russia. But I think that what Mr. Trump doesn't understand, that kitsch and class are not the same. And yeah, sure, there are some gold things which is just gold, okay, it's metal. But something tells me that after his visit to United Kingdom, and we can sit here and talk about Great Britain, whatever we want, but it was at some point of time the greatest empire on earth. It straddled like basically all of the globe, for all intents and purposes. And I can tell you one thing: even if you go to the Buckingham Palace, if you can take a look at the Buckingham Palace, it's one of the rooms, you see. But of course, you have to understand that behind this grandeur and gold and all those things, there is a long, many centuries, very many centuries history of British conquests, and you know what? Some of them, exhibiting an incredible, how to put it politely? I mean, they were grand, okay? Just put it this way. Nobody denies United Kingdom its grandeur, and it gave so much to humanity, while obviously taking also too much. But from, Isaac Newton to, Shakespeare to what have you. Beatles, Pink Floyd, for crying out loud. But this is the grandeur. You go into the Buckingham Palace, and you are overwhelmed with the history because you understand it is something which represents one of the greatest empires in history, and there is a lot of culture and class behind it. And then, of course, you can go and take a look at, Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. You see this? Yeah, there you go. That's another great Austro-Hungarian empire. You see, very beautiful palace, and this is just one of the corridors, lobbies of it. And so, because obviously those palaces are gigantic, and then we can go and take a look at Madrid. Look at this Royal Palace in Madrid. You see? Oh yeah, that's beautiful. So, and that's just grandeur. This is again Spaniards, one of the greatest empires in history, also gave us so much, Then of course you go to Russian Hermitage, which is of course Winter Palace, and this is the throne hall where the Tsars were sitting. Yeah, pardon me, it's all gold. Then you can go at the main entrance of Winter Palace, Hermitage, which is today. You see yourself. It's all semi-precious stones. It's gold. It's paintings by the greatest artists of the era, and you can go to all other kind of corridors or lobbies of Hermitage, as you can see yourself. Yeah. So let me put it this way. Vienna, St. Petersburg, or London, they are very impressed with Mr. Trump's 24-karat gold. So you understand, I'm being sarcastic, I'm being facetious here, but that's what I'm saying. We can sit here and talk about everything, about colonialism. Absolutely, nobody argues about it. There were crimes committed, and West bears responsibility for this. But in the end, if you take a look at what have been given to the world and basically establishing those standards of the norms of the beauty and incredible, craft with which all of this have been created. Apart from, we're not even talking about the collections of, let's say, in somewhere in Prado, let alone in Hermitage, which is, Louvre and Hermitage, they are basically kind of contesting each other whose collection is best, but it's the whole other story. And so Mr. Trump trying to impress it with the 24-karat gold is kind of like me trying to impress the battleship Iowa, and saying that, yeah, you see, look, I'm really tough. Yeah, and those 16-inch guns will look at me like, who the hell you are? So, and this is the thing. And the reason, in the end, after all that, I'm coming to you is that if you go back 2 days ago, actually 3 days ago, and you take a look at my video, which was, you see, it's called GIO, which is the Government Accountability Office, and Karma. And this was the stunning, revelation. I think it was very well timed to, obviously, meeting in Quantica. And Mr. Hexet, who is probably the ram which Trump uses to basically destroy essentially the vicious circle of those generals and admirals in Pentagon who, well, when you look attentively at, and you go back and listen to what I was saying there, it is a catastrophe. In terms of the ground forces, it is unmitigated disaster. The United States is a paper tiger. It has basically the park of the machines, armor from tanks to personnel, which not is improving. It's just absolutely decaying to the point that, United States cannot conduct any serious operation. Forget about something which is like they call on them, those crazies from Poland or Scandinavia, that, United States should go in Europe and beat those Ruskies. Well, Ruskies are not impressed, to put it mildly, okay? And then, of course, you go into all kinds of other things, which you can go back again to my today's post in my blog, which explains to you that while United States produces about 300 air defense missiles a year, maybe they will get to the 500 of all types. Russians produced in the last 1,113 days of the special military operation 131,000 air defense missiles of different types. So you have to understand, we're talking about it's two orders of magnitude. And I cannot explain everything else because it will take, I don't know, hours. And basically what is going to be happening tomorrow, most likely, and already rumors begin to circulate, is what have been reflected in, for good Lord, they are morons, but at least they write about it in Washington Post. And Washington Post basically produced this, article. Man, look at this. This is updated today, which is today 29th at 9:26 p.m. Eastern Time, which was about 3 hours ago. So, and look at this. Military leaders voice concern over Hex's new Pentagon strategy. Well, first, the word strategy has to be removed from the lexicon, from the verbiage in the United States, at least temporarily, before it produces people who understand what modern war is and how the military strategy plugs itself into the grand strategy of the state. But again, considering the fact that we're looking at the decaying empire and basically political system in the United States, so it's very difficult to explain to them what strategy is. Because, for example, the procurement issues, I mean, you have to be complete moron to continue procure what those admirals and generals procure, essentially. And so here is what Washington Post states, that military leaders have raised serious concerns about the Trump administration's forthcoming defense strategy, exposing a divide between the Pentagon political and uniformed leadership, as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth summons Tom Brass to a highly unusual summit in Virginia on Tuesday. Yeah, which is tomorrow. The question is, you know what, from the get-go, you may not like Pete Hegseth. Nobody really likes him. I don't, but he is actually probably Israeli first, Christian Zionist and things of this nature. But you cannot also deny the fact that U.S. armed forces are in a pathetic state. But the uniformed people, if we go and begin to discuss matter of fact, show me what war, any major operation United States won since after the World War II. And I'm not talking about those beating the crap out of the Iraqi forces. Yeah, we don't have any. We don't have this record. All wars are lost. And if not for the Eisenhower's interference in 1953, Korean War would have been probably lost too. But Eisenhower, being true strategist and being the man of the highest moral qualities for the statesman, I make this distinction, he knew that he had to extricate the United States from this quagmire. So, and that is why it ended up where it ended up on the 48th parallel, and it was the kind of draw thing, but essentially it was a defeat. So, and if we go further to the Washington Post article, look what we have. We're beginning to have this, so to speak, those morsels of the rumors, which may not be rumors, but which are reasonable under current situation, that President Donald Trump will attend the abrupt gathering of generals and admirals at Marine Corps Base Quantico, where Hegseth is expected to deliver remarks on military standards and the warrior ethos. I don't know what is warrior ethos at this stage, but whatever. What are military standards? And yeah, it's the whole other story. But at least something tells me he will be talking about how the hell did we end up being essentially military, but bordering on the second to third world, where nothing works properly. There is no any kind of modern weaponry in the pipeline. And the question obviously stays with those admirals and generals, these uniformed people who are obviously in the not all, but most of them are in the pockets of the US military industrial complex, which is about about primarily bottom line and making money, profit. And so, even as uniformed leaders fear mass firings, or they should, in Stalin's times, for that state of their weaponry in Soviet Union, you would have been executed, but obviously we're living in the United States, which makes the country great. And you know what, sometimes this everlasting trials and all that probably is not the first thing which will happen to you. But firings, yes, they should fear mass firings, because objectively speaking, I am a United States citizen, for example. I have the right to ask, how the hell did you bring this military, which you proclaim to be the finest fighting force in history, which it never was, but still, and look at this now. Well, and a drastic reorganization of the combatant command structure and the military hierarchy. Well, I wrote about this. I wrote 4 books about it, especially the latest one. And yes, United States doesn't have general staff. United States doesn't have general staff culture. They do not understand how it works. And so any ideas or any types of the efforts, let's put it this way. Oh, forget about the efforts. How about even just voicing their concern, like Mr. Milley did before he retired, that, how about we do this and that, which is suddenly Mr. Kropsy, the neocon from Pentagon, accused him of trying to emulate Russian general staff. Well, guess who is better? I'm not gonna go there. We understand. Operationally and strategically, Pentagon is compared to Gerasimov and his general staff, are amateurs. So, people familiar with the editing process who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe sensitive deliberations, describe the growing sense of frustration with a plan they consider myopic. Oh gosh, remember the title of my first book? Myopia, yeah. And potentially irrelevant given the president's highly personal and sometimes contradictory approach to foreign policy. Well, it's not sometimes. Trump has complete contradictory approach to foreign policy because he understands pretty much nothing about international relations and strategic balance. He doesn't. Neither do most of those people who surround him. He is completely controlled by Israel, by neocons, and as the result, he lives in this kind of alternative universe, which when you multiply it by his essentially, we know, the narcissistic personality, it's contradictory, okay? Let's put it this way. And so Washington Post continues to deliver those things. There we go. Hexet and his policy officials have signaled that the Pentagon will withdraw some forces from Europe and consolidate commands in a way that unnerves some US allies. Well, because Europe wants to fight, the Americans to fight for it, but particularly amid Russia's war with Ukraine and its recent repeated incursions into NATO airspace. We know who made those incursions into NATO airspace, and they have to ask the SOBs in Kyiv, why do they continue to do this? For years, Pentagon strategy had been anchored in the idea that the nation's best defense was in building and maintaining strong military alliances abroad. It's a stupid idea. It was based on the, primarily issues relating to the World War II and how the history of the World War II has been written in the United States by the German generals, and who presented this fairy tale to all kinds of the military academies and other military educational facilities in the United States. And as a result, you have those generals who still think that somehow Gulf War 1.0 was something outstanding. It was not. And so when you took a look attentively at the scale of operations, even at the current special military operation, it's not even serious. So critics of that approach within the administration have argued that it has made the US an expensive force on foreign soil. Oh, absolutely, they have a point. This is what many people who actually do have the interest of the United States at heart were speaking about constantly. Instead of securing domestic US interests, well, we know why United States cannot secure domestic U.S. interest. It is the slap bitch of Israel, and it will continue to be mired in all that. Trump's approach so far has largely been to prod allies to spend more on their own defense, at times alienating Republican defense hawks in Congress who are also urging higher defense spending at home. Republican defense hawks in Congress are cowards, and they are all in the pocket of Israel. And so, plus none of them, there is not a single Republican senator. Even so goes to, a Democratic Party. There is not a single person on the Capitol Hill who understands war. None, including all those heroes like Tim Cotton, all those guys who, I am the veteran of Afghanistan and, Iraq and things like that. Yeah, you're not going to get combined arms operation understanding by doing the counterinsurgency, which is nothing more than police operation of the high intensity. So what happens next? Well, what happens next is this. And they talk about that Trump ordered troops to Portland, Oregon, and I cannot necessarily say that I disagree with him, because considering the fact into what country has turned into in the last, let's say, 10 years. So, but there are still substantial sections of the document which they're talking about, which is, of course, briefing, and that do focus on China. But these are largely concentrated on the threat of an attack on Taiwan rather than global competition with the U.S. largest adversary, 5 people said. Well, they think that China wants to compete with the United States militarily. I don't think so, but you know what, at least this is how people think in all those, including realist circles, pardon me, circles in the United States, who think that, oh yeah, if anybody who is larger economically, which China has been now for like at least 5-7 years, I mean, so much larger economically than the United States that, I mean, it's too late, guys. But militarily, yeah, I would say that China is still not there, but, and you know what, they say that U.S. military is unprepared for the risk of a Chinese invasion for, you know what, in Taiwan. I don't think Chinese want to invade Taiwan, but what do I know, So obviously those people who lost all their wars, screwed it up, turned the United States into the nation which is bankrupt and is now not sovereign nation being run by the neocon cabal. Sure, they know better, apart from the fact that, again, as I already stated in the last few videos, that I'm beginning to say it openly, US military is incompetent. I mean, all those generals, they know how to secure their pensions, how to secure their safe retirement, and then probably position in some symbolic role on some of the boards of directors of all those other corporations which they, underwrite and make those, technical demands for their, weapon systems. And so they actually, what Hexet is talking about and what Trump is talking about, essentially correct. As usually, it will fail in terms of the execution, but it's when they talk about Chinese invasion, they call for Washington to shift attention and resources towards the problem. United States got the problem, big one. It cannot fight the wars. It cannot win them, and so it's a pattern which repeats itself constantly over and over again. And now you have the people who have no technological expertise, who do not understand their enemies. Well, as I already stated, there is not a single real Russian scholar in the United States today, anywhere near in the power levels of power and influence. And as a result, we know what is happening right now in the zone of the special military operation, right? So, what are we gonna do? Well, if you remember, a Russian defense ministry used to have such defense minister who was Anatoly Serdyukov. The guy was utterly corrupt, but he was a good accountant. And his task, why he was put in, was to actually break apart all this vicious circle and, this Cosa Nostra type, support, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, in the still remnants of the Soviet military organization. And, well, he obviously screwed it up badly, but he broke this, essentially, mafia, if you wish. It's not mafia, but there was a lot of things, of this nature, hush money and all that stuff. And after it was all done, Russia started to rebuild her military on a completely new foundation. And guess what? Obviously, as strange as it may count, Sertikov screwed it up so badly that he, together with, famous throwing the dirty water out of the bathtub, he threw the child out. Apart from the fact that his lover, he was married, but he had a lover. She was essentially a thief. She was also accountant and economist and things like that. So, what happened? Well, Russians returned much of the Soviet approach to the building of the armed forces, and they built them and they rebuilt them into what you observe today. And I want to explain to some, as I already gave you the kind of ratio of the production of just air defense missiles, about what United States produces and why it will not be able to ramp up all this production is because what can I say? It's a complex issue. It relates to military culture, history, and by military culture, I understand what Mr. Hexet will be delivering tomorrow about warrior ethos. Russians do have different warrior ethos because Russians defended their country for millennium. They are trained. It's on the genetic level. And Americans, well, there was a 9/11, but it wasn't really an attack. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy and the most spectacular in the worst way possible terrorist act. But the last time United States got into any kind of, and even that, I mean, in Canada, 1814, then, White House was burned and things like that. You know what, regiment level clashes, it's skirmishes essentially. It's a lower tactical level action. And Russians were doing this all the time, And so when you begin to compare this, will they understand those generals and admirals? Many of them, they still believe, they still drink this Kool-Aid, that they are finest fighting force in history, which the United States never was. And especially U.S. ground forces. They were good. Nobody says. United States has heroic people. It has heroic officers, heroic soldiers. Many of them really good soldiers. But as the culture, military culture, ethos, it doesn't have it. So, and the only thing which we can remember today is, oh my God, we beat the 5-year-old kid in the sandbox. What about Afghanistan? What about Vietnam? What about all other things? Are they preparing now to and try to collect forces to attack Venezuela or Iran? Iran likely, I would say, but then again, there are no resources. You have to understand that anybody who says that United States can catch up, forget about quality for now, but what about quantity? And if they can catch up with China, I have a bridge to sell, okay? Brooklyn one, no less. Cash payments only. I will give you the where to transfer money. And so it's this type of the situation which many among us, people who are contrarians, but contrarians not because we are just doing it for the sake of some monetization on YouTube or just, to impress people or selling BS to or snake oil to all kinds of the, fanboys. No, we're talking about people with the military intelligence backgrounds who saw things. And, what can I say? Doesn't look good. But empire is in the final convulsions. Again, empires, how fast, I don't know, but we can see it. And if you think that Russians know less about United States than, let's say, Washington, D.C., you are very wrong. They already calculated and made the forecasts, or rather contingency planning, which is, Pentagon simply doesn't have, never had it. There was never plan B. They admitted it themselves. There's always plan 1, plan A, we go in, we defeat there's something, and then we lose the war. So simple as that. But then again, as I already stated, European theory is a completely different affair. And that is why you cannot buy history, you cannot buy the school of thought, you cannot buy experience. It's the same as Russians couldn't have touched US Navy in 1945. It was the most magnificent Navy history ever saw. It was the most powerful Navy in history. You just cannot just go there and build it. So what do? And that's why Russians developed their own completely different strategies, and which worked in the end. And guess what? Show me any supersonic anti-shipping missile in American arsenal. None. Doesn't exist and will not exist for a long time. Now, in terms of hypersonics, we do not even go there. This is how it works. This is how you learn. Did they learn? Well, the United States led the Soviet Union in acquiring technologies and signal processing for a long time. Until the 1980s, when the Russians suddenly started to catch up. Obviously, the United States has always blamed it on somebody else, like Toshiba, which sold allegedly 5-axis CNC machines, which it did, though. But it was more complex than that. And then what do we have today? You know the result. And before I go, I want to kind of wrap it up. Here's the guy. Well, he is married to an Applebaum who is possessed. She is not just a Russophobe. She hates Russian gods. She abhors Russian genetics. She lies. She passes for historian. This is the kind of historians your United States Ivy League prepares. And so this is your husband, who also hates Russians. I mean, he's a Pole, and he admitted to the blowjob. If you remember, you can look it up. The blowjob by Sikorsky. So yeah, he fellatio for the United States. But look at this. Sikorsky admitted that the end conflict, the conflict in Ukraine will end as the First World War. Okay, Mr. Sikorsky, being actually a journey and the asset of MI6, he's dumb as a stump. And so as the result, he says that the current war is likely to end in the same way as the First World War. One or the other side will exhaust reserves for its continuation, the Polish minister said. Okay, and I can tell you already, one side already exhausted its resources, and it ain't Russia. And so, but yeah, at least they begin to kind of, fluctuate, in their opinions, and even Mr. Stubb, oh good, Alexander Stubb, the Finnish prime minister, good lord, he suddenly says, no, we're not going to be shooting down the Russian planes. Well, try, see what happens. Baron Mannerheim had enough guts and forevision, to understand that he needs to talk to Stalin in 1944. Because in 1942, he already knew, if you listen to his unique conversation with Hitler, one of very few actual recordings of Hitler's real voice, when Hitler in 1942 admitted that we never expected that. And he said that so many tanks, so many planes, how the hell do they do that? I can tell you that it wasn't Land-Lease. And he said, we never knew it, that it happened this way. Does it remind you of something? Well, this is exactly what I was warning for now, second decade. They learn about real war, learn about real economy, and maybe, then some positive may happen. But not the crop of the American so-called military leaders. And before I conclude today, there is a guy who just left in the the comments, and I think it warrants me responding to it that, oh my God, what you said, everything is correct, what you say, but except one thing, you talk about the situational awareness, which is better than American one. Yeah. A minute, Russians have better situational awareness for a simple reason. They outproduce, in terms of drones, including high-end drones, recon strike drones, order of magnitude more than the whole NATO combined together with the United States. So, and then of course they have the air defense, which shuts down pretty much most, which flies towards the Russian front lines and towards Russian rear positions. So yeah, Russians do have. So it's not by space alone, albeit I do admit that United States has the top-notch, world-class, the best, satellite constellation, but Russians are second and not getting, closer and closer. And again, they will also get closer on a very different technological basis, and that's the whole other can of worms. But yeah, nobody argues about the United States possessing the excellent, recon capabilities in space. In terms on the ground, not even close. United States Army wouldn't know what hit it when it gets, God forbid, into this type of the situation. And this is what I wanted to tell you today, guys. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee and two. And have a nice rest, whatever you have. And I'll talk to you later, guys. Have a nice evening, morning, what have you. Bye-bye.